learned during this trip was that the Great Barrier Reef is actually owned by the Aboriginals and was taken care of by the Aboriginals and still is, but we don't see them. And the Great Barrier Reef just seems like a tourist site because that's who are on the boats all day. It's just tourists going out to see all the fish. Another thing that I learned is that the Aboriginals actually adore the name Blacktown because it keeps their name remembered and it keeps their name from being silenced. And the last thing, one of the biggest takeaways was during the smoke ceremony. He was telling us how smoke ceremonies are used to bring communities closer together, and he was talking about all of the countries and continents and how everyone is included in their ceremonies, and that's just really cool that they are able to include everyone from other continents, but in our culture we don't do that. So I think it's awesome that they are able to include us even when we aren't able to include them in our remembrance of other cultures. And one thing that I'll take away from all of this experience is just to keep talking about the Aboriginals and how awesome that they are and were, and that we can keep respecting their culture and including them just like they included us.
After taking this class and visiting Australia firsthand, my perception of Australia completely changed. I used to think of Australia as somewhere that people go for the white sand beaches and tourism, but there's so much more history behind it than most of us know. So learning about the Aboriginals and some of their cultures and their art and how they valued the land it was really important to me, like during the trip, seeing like the way that they used to live and how popular culture has taken over, and their culture is now hidden and forgotten about. And for us to go and find their culture and their art, we kind of had to search for it. So I think knowing this knowledge and having this knowledge about the Aboriginals and how they were moved out of their country, kind of similar to the Native Americans in America, it was really interesting to see how the culture was in Australia, and I think that's how my perception changed the most.
If I had another opportunity, I would just kind of dive into Aboriginal culture and Australian culture a little more. I felt like we just scratched the surface. For example, we experienced a smoke ceremony, but it kind of felt out of place just because he came to us and he was kind of just scrounging around for these things he needed for the ceremony, like around the stadium, and it kind of just made me feel uncomfortable in a sense. I didn't want to disrespect him, but I felt like if we went to his land, or we actually like went somewhere within the community that was sacred to his ancestors, that would have been more meaningful. You're good.
So as my other group members have talked about, we've learned a lot during this whole trip, and while we wish we had more time, we've covered so much during those 10 days that we were there, things that would take a whole quarter for us to cover. And something that I think people tend to forget is that during these trips, like, not only are we playing and bonding as a team, but we were studying abroad, we were learning things, and it's things that you're not going to learn just being here and reading in a book. We got to firsthand experience another culture, whether it be the Aboriginals or just Australian culture in general, when we were playing. Times that, like, that's not necessarily part of our academic side of that trip. We were learning so much from these other girls while our games are getting rained out, and we sit at dinner with this group of girls from a different country, and we all get to sit and talk about how different our cultures are, or just even like a language like difference and things like that, getting to sit down and have those conversations, but then also get up and show each other dances that mean something to our culture, and then dances that mean something to theirs. Like, it was so much more than also just the Aboriginals, but just current popular culture that has made Australia, and what attracts so many people to that culture. And it is important to remember where Australia came from and all that, and just like it's important to know where America's came from. And I think that's the biggest thing that we've learned, is that there's so much similarity between the two, yet they're so different today. And being able to hear the way that, I mean, they talk about our culture, and when we're sitting down with the mayor, his views on like our country and what they automatically think about us and versus what we automatically think about them, and it really opens your eyes to stereotypes and everything, and that you don't know until you really get there. And I feel like so many times athletes are misunderstood as not always learning as much as we probably should, and I think that that was completely wrong, and this opportunity has allowed us to learn so much in just a span of 10 days that we would have never been able to do without this trip. And we want to thank everybody that has made this trip possible, and these are memories, bonds, and I mean lessons that we'll remember for the rest of our lives.